Bases Loaded 1 is an all-time classic. And I really like how pitching works in Bases Loaded 2. However, starting with the third game, the series really went downhill. The third and fourth games for the NES are similar, and I really dislike both of them. Even the Super Nintendo games don't really impress me all that much. So what happened? I mean, how did they screw up such a great baseball series? Well, let's take a quick look and see what they did to make Bases Loaded fall. At first glance, Bases Loaded 3 is really similar to the first two games. You've got that same behind-the-pitcher view, the view that became a trademark of this series. The fielding has changed, however. Everything is looked at from the center field camera, which can be really confusing, especially if you're the one doing the fielding. And the biggest problem is that everything is zoomed way in. This is a problem that we've run into before, actually, and this is a really big issue. It's hard enough to field the ball when you're looking the wrong way, but it's impossible to field things if you're zoomed in that far. RBI Baseball 4 on the Sega Genesis is a pretty good example of the same problem. Hitting and pitching aren't perfect in that game, but they're not necessarily awful. However, fielding is a major issue since you cannot see what you're doing. Now, at least the RBI series for the Genesis helps you out by putting players in the right place for you. In Bases Loaded 3, there's no way for you to even know where your outfielders are positioned. In fact, it was so bad that they had to add in this radar feature in Bases Loaded 4 just to make it playable. And the radar feature is awful as well. I mean, why make players look two different places at the same time? Why don't you do something simple, you know, like zooming the camera out? Fielding in these games is simply awful. It ruins the experience for me. But pitching isn't that much better, to be honest. The original Bases Loaded was great because you had a lot of control over what happened to the ball. In the original game, you would first push the A button to pitch and start the windup. Then you would choose how fast you wanted the ball to be pitched, and then you would choose where you wanted to go. This created a very strong feeling of control and power. And when you're batting, the ball is still coming in slow enough to give you enough time to react. And the pitching system in Bases Loaded 2 is even better, at least in my opinion. People have asked me before in the comments section to explain just why I like the pitching so much in that game, so here goes. Though the manual doesn't explain it all that well, the pitching controls are more or less the same. The nice thing though is that you can put more movement on your pitch depending on how long you hold the direction on the control pad. In other words, you can throw pitches that go just a little bit inside or outside. And you can also throw high fastballs that cause the hitters to swing off balance. This is a level of precision that just isn't there in any other NES game. It really is remarkable. It lets you work the hitter by pitching inside, outside, and then high, all with variable speeds. And it reminds me a lot of seeing Roger Clemens throwing high heat like this. Now, this was a fantastic pitching system, especially for an NES game. I've played a lot of NES baseball games, but I can't think of any other game that gives you that level of pitching control. It's amazing that they managed to ruin it. The third game in this series looks the same, sure, but it's just not the same. I can't throw the high heat no matter what I do. and I'm honestly not sure how I'm supposed to throw a curveball. Now, the system in Bases Loaded 3 is so complex that it literally takes 2 manual pages to explain. You're supposed to choose a location before you push the A button, which is the opposite of how the first 2 games in the series work. You then push A to start the windup. Then you can change the degree of the location by tapping the A button, which is really bizarre. Meanwhile, you control the speed by holding the up button. Well, I don't think that anybody could have come up with a less intuitive system. You control the degree of location of the pitch by tapping the A button. You choose the location first before you pitch the ball. It's totally bizarre, and it honestly just doesn't work right. In fact, in my experience, the manual is actually wrong. You can influence the position of the pitch after you've delivered it. But the worst part is that you have to keep tapping the A button to make it work. In the original game, you actually choose your speed before you deliver, which makes a lot more sense. Again, I have absolutely no idea why they decided to fix or improve a system that wasn't broken in the first place. And hitting in these games is even more of a nightmare. To hit the ball, you have to swing the second that it leaves the pitcher's hand. It's not like in the first Bases Loaded where the trick is to watch the catcher's mitt. The secret to hitting in the third and fourth games is to simply swing as soon as the ball is delivered and hope for the best. In fact, in Bases Loaded 3, if your swing is even a second too late, it won't register, which is hilarious. Like, I know that this is probably realistic, but this is a Nintendo baseball game. It's supposed to be fun, not frustrating. Now, the good thing about these later games is that they sped things up. You can play through a full 9-inning game pretty quickly. The bad thing, though, is everything else. I really hate how fielding works in these games. Everything is backwards, which means I always end up throwing to the wrong base. Sometimes I make spectacular outfield plays without knowing what I just did. Most of the time, though, I find myself trying to control players that the game just doesn't let me control. And the worst part is that there is simply no reason for the fielding screen to be backwards. I understand the side view in Bases Loaded 2, sure. It's not great, but it makes sense to me, kind of. And notice that everything is zoomed out, which means you can see what you're doing. The sprites are way too big in the third and fourth games. You feel like you're playing in a Little League stadium. And it's not like these sprites look good either. This was just a poor design decision and it really hurt the games. And you know, that's not the only design flaw that really hurt this series. As usual, Jaleco gave Bases Loaded 3 a heavy advertising treatment. The focus was on this bizarre point system that the game uses. In the United States, that translated over to playing a perfect game, which featured prominently in ads for the game. The manual explains that the game-by-game ranking system took the place of the normal 130-game season that fans of the series are used to. The idea is that you would face a harder team in your next game after scoring a certain number of points. The ultimate goal was to beat a level 5 team and get a rating of 100 points. That's the so-called perfect game. You start with 100 points, you lose points for doing bad things, and can only gain a few extra points for making great plays. But the whole thing with all the points really feels pointless to me. Like, who cares how you play? Why isn't the purpose of playing a baseball game, to win the baseball game? Why do they have to come up with this extremely complicated system? Isn't the sport of baseball interesting enough as it is? Anyway, Jalico also did a drawing with the US version of Bases Loaded 3. The grand prize was one of 700 different posters autographed by Ryne Sandberg. It's not bad, I guess, but there are 700 of these babies out there. But at least they had the courtesy of giving you this certificate of authenticity. The first prize was a Bases Loaded windbreaker. Interestingly, the name of the game isn't anywhere on the jacket. The only identifier is the zipper, and this likely fell off of most of these jackets. Meanwhile, the second prize was a one-year subscription to Topps Magazine. Given that Topps Magazine only lasted a little over 2 years, I can't say that this was a particularly impressive prize. Anyway, even the sweepstakes prizes that came with this game were pretty disappointing. Now, the other interesting thing is that there was a Bases Loaded arcade game in Japan back in 1988. However, that arcade game was also a huge disappointment. This game is just a home run derby contest. Now, the sound isn't emulated correctly. I presume that it probably had a special speech sound chip like the NES version. There were 2 versions of this in the arcade, but they play exactly the same way. You try to hit 4 home runs in 6 pitches. If you do, you go up to the next level. And that's all there is to it. And if you compare this to the competition, this game really was a major letdown. You might remember me showing clips from Pro Yaku World Stadium, which also came out in 1988. Namco's game looks absolutely fantastic, plus of course you can actually play a full game instead of just a home run derby. Jalico's arcade game looks like the NES game with a couple of extra colors. I would rather play Pro Yaku World Stadium any day of the week. Honestly, I feel like Jalico was just lazy. So I also took a quick look at the Super Nintendo Bases Loaded games. They're better than 3 and 4 on the NES, but there are a lot of similar problems there. We'll cover those games in full detail more in the future. But as for the NES series, all the fiddling around wound up hurting things. There was really no reason to change the pitching system, which felt perfect to me in Bases Loaded 2. Zooming in on the fielders was just a poor design decision. And in the Japanese versions, the sound just isn't as good. The first Famicom version still has the best sound I've ever heard in an 8-bit baseball game. Even though it takes a long time to complete a single game, I would still rather play the first one. The final 2 versions are just painful. Anyway, I guess this goes to show you that progress is not necessarily inevitable. I'm just amazed that they screwed up this great series so badly. You'd think that it would be a lot easier to just come out with the same game again with like a roster update or maybe with some extra teams, which is what Famistad did. They didn't need to make this so hard on themselves.